girls basketball players definitely should lift weights. I'm not sure how this is still debatable in 2016, but I've seen a couple of threads recently arguing that girls don't need to lift weights and that girls shouldn't lift weights when playing basketball. And I definitely disagree, and I think most anybody involved with sports science would disagree. And I think one of the reasons provided for not lifting weights was that somehow lifting weights would increase the likelihood of injury, which is false. And from the most basic ability to reduce injuries is to get stronger. There are definitely other ways to try to reduce injuries, including getting better at specific movements, improving motor control, doing less risky movements, which may or may not be possible depending on the sport of choice. But the most basic way to reduce the likelihood of an injury is to increase strength. Second, there was another comment that said lifting weights will, cause players to lose flexibility, and the loss of flexibility will then lead to more injuries. Again, this is not true. You can actually use weightlifting to improve flexibility, because if you can do a full squat, especially with weight, you probably have pretty decent flexibility, pretty decent mobility. One of the things that I see with players, typically players entering college who have never lifted weights before, is they're unable to do a squat. And so even without weight, and even after learning or being instructed in the basic squatting technique, they still are unable to do a full squat, full body weight squat. And one of the reasons is they lack the mobility and in some cases the flexibility to get into the position. So typically tight hips, tight ankles, tight calves, there's restriction in the movement. And so developing basketball players who lift weights can increase this range of motion, can increase their ability, dorsiflexion of the ankle, increase their hip mobility by doing squats. It's not going to restrict or limit that movement, but if you do it correctly and you lift weights through the full range of motion, you can actually improve your flexibility as opposed to reducing your flexibility. I think a lot of the ideas of weightlifting, at least in this couple threads that I've been reading, seem still to be based on kind of bodybuilding examples from the 1980s and 90s. Which, if you're working with a good strength and conditioning coach or reading any kind of competent material on the internet or watching any competent videos on the internet to decide what to do and how to do it in a resistance training program, it's not going to be based on bodybuilding. It's going to be based on athletic development, and one area of athletic development is developing strength, the ability to produce force, the ability to reduce or resist force. And this ability to resist force, especially in terms of deceleration in linear movement or change of direction, and also landings from jumps, those are the areas that are especially going to help to reduce injuries, because those are the sites of many injuries that occur in basketball. Quick changes of direction and landing from jumps. And so if players are able to resist these forces better, they're going to tend to be able to reduce the amount of injuries. And so I think to suggest or to advise female basketball players that they shouldn't be lifting weights, I think it's problematic, and it's setting players up for problems in the future, whether those problems are suffering an injury or simply decreased performance because the other players who are lifting develop their athleticism, and their strength, and consequently their abilities to a higher extent.